Leaders are remembered, be they loved or feared. Alone they are inscribed on the pages of history. But what of the men and women whose hands build their monuments and whose blood stains their battlefields? The people who, against all odds, wield the power to reshape history. People in power at this time on AlJazeera.
Fortifying Ras Lanuf, opposition rebels fend off fierce attacks by Gaddafi's forces, with reports of several killed. Hello from me, David Foster. You're watching Al Jazeera live from Doha. Also ahead,
there have been at the most 100 people killed.
The Libyan leader plays down the number of those killed, insisting that Al-Qaeda is to blame for the unrest in his country. The US president says NATO's weighing up military options in response to what's happening in Libya. Failed mission, how the order for a British diplomatic operation into Libya came straight from the British Foreign Minister. And Egypt's Prime Minister appoints a new caretaker cabinet in Cairo. No to foreign intervention, but yes to a no-fly zone. The words of one Libyan rebel leader who says his men can take on Gaddafi's rockets and tanks, but not his air power. Well, supporters of the Libyan leader have begun moving eastward in an effort to push the rebels back and recapture fallen towns. Take a look, first of all, at what's been happening in Tripoli. Gaddafi making a brief appearance in the symbolic Green Square. Oh, the crowd's going crazy. That's in Tripoli. Moving a bit further east to Misrata, a big place this, and the rebels were filmed celebrating their victory over Gaddafi's forces. What they claim is a victory. There's been more fighting, and rebels say they do fear that Gaddafi's forces are regrouping. Then going past Gaddafi's hometown of Sirte, that's somewhere around there, to Ras Lanuf. Big battles going on there. Gaddafi's forces bombarding this oil-rich city. Several are reported to have died, including a family simply trying to escape. Let's try and wrap all this up now with Lawrence Lee.
The more pictures emerge of the fighting, the more it looks like a civil war. There are various front lines. This just one in the big town of Misrata. If these pictures look upsetting, they're nothing compared to the rest. Odd then that the government says it's trying not to cause too much death and destruction there. Very odd that Gaddafi himself appears entirely blind to details, like civilians or children being hurt.
We have cells that were activated, took up weapons to kill policemen, kill soldiers. There were casualties on both sides for 2 or 3 days, and weapons were stolen. Now, on both sides, the army and the police aside, the rebels, there have been at the most 100 people killed.
Out in the desert, it's obviously less important if Gaddafi's military can't shoot straight, and it has been striking how inaccurate their bombing runs have been from the air. While it's true that some weapons dumps have been destroyed, in many places the warplanes have continually missed their targets. But even if on occasion the rebels do find a way of shooting one down, air supremacy remains a huge psychological advantage for Gaddafi.
When we arrived, we didn't find any opposition because the people here are good. The people welcome us and greet us. But when we were inside, 2 Mirage planes overflew us and 1 helicopter. They wanted to shoot, but we shot them first.
All the same, if there are questions over the aptitude of the Libyan military, then the same must go for the rebel forces, whose euphoric advance was met with organised resistance they couldn't handle, and so little hospitals have been overwhelmed. It's also emerging that many of the fighters have no idea how to use their weapons and are injuring themselves. Some of these pictures suggest a desire to fight is all well and good until the reality of armed battle hits home. So with the prospect of the country tearing itself to pieces, it's hardly surprising that voices close to the regime are once again urging dialogue. The hope in this intervention on Libyan TV must have been that it sounded better than if it had come from Gaddafi.
Dear brothers and sisters, this is a chance in history. We are threatened and need to act today, to work on preparing for national dialogue and to calm the violence, so Libyans all over the country can feel safe and secure and at peace, so we can go back to school and work.
Gaddafi supporters in Tripoli might buy that argument. The east of the country might think it a trick. But as time goes on and the violence looks open-ended, it's not as though anyone else has any better ideas. Lawrence Lee, AlJazeera.
The US President has indicated that NATO is considering all options, including military ones, to deal with the Libyan situation.
I want to send a very clear message to those who are around Colonel Gaddafi. It is their choice to make how they operate moving forward, and they will be held accountable for whatever violence continues to take place there. In the meantime, we've got NATO, as we speak, consulting in Brussels around a wide range of potential options, including potential military options, in response to the violence that continues to take place inside of Libya.
Al Jazeera's Patty Culhane joins us now from Washington, D.C. Patty, it's been suggested by some people that this is a sign that Obama's becoming a little bit more belligerent about what's happening in Libya. But in reality, did NATO ever suggest that it wasn't considering all options? Had it taken any off the table in the first place?
No, this is something that the president's been saying, that, all options are on the table. What's striking is that he brought up the potential for military options and that he's putting some sort of time frame on it. Remember last week, his Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, who's really taken the lead on this, told members of Congress that any decision on a no-fly zone was a long way off. This weekend, just yesterday, his chief of staff, pretty much his spokesman, really criticized anyone suggesting about a no-fly zone, saying it's not like you're playing a video game. But this was the president saying, we are going to NATO, we are talking about military options. That puts more of a time frame on it. We believe Secretary of Defense Robert Gates is going to be in those discussions on Thursday, so we will have, the days to look at what this administration's doing. He's putting it in more of a context. He brought up military options. Now, he has not gone as far as members of Congress, which have been really pushing him to prepare for a no-fly zone, to possibly look at electronically jamming the Libyan government's communications. Congress is taking a very unusual tact here. They are pushing the president on foreign policy issues. They are ahead of him on this. So it looks as if this is the president saying what he's been saying, but again, putting more of an emphasis on going to NATO as opposed to the UN, which is telling, I think, as well.
Other than a no-fly zone, what military options are possible?
Well, as I mentioned, electronic jamming of the communications equipment, that is something that the U.S. could probably do from a little ways off. There's the no-fly zone. They could also arm the rebel groups, and that's been something that some of the senators have talked about. Senator John Kerry, who sometimes speaks for the administration, said it was an interesting proposition, and he said it was, likely that weapons were going to make their way to the rebels, but he didn't